Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Eric, the workplace safety guy. And today we're diving into a topic that for me is the backbone of safety in any work environment: fire protection on construction sites. You know, it's easy to underestimate the complexity behind a simple spark. But the truth is, to ensure our construction sites, these incredible engines of progress, are truly safe from the devastating power of fire, there's a universe of standards and guidelines we need to understand. And today, we're going to unveil the two major references in the United States, OSHA and NFPA 241. Get ready, because the journey will be deep and revealing. First, let's get to the basics. What is OSHA? The acronym stands for Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Founded in 1970, OSHA has a clear and vital mission: to ensure safe and healthful working conditions for working men and women by setting and enforcing standards and by providing training, outreach, education, and assistance. Although it is a U.S. federal agency, its standards and the philosophy behind them serve as a beacon for occupational safety worldwide. Many safety legislations and practices in other countries, including Brazil, are inspired by or directly influenced by OSHA's guidelines. OSHA is not just a set of rules, it's a commitment to the life and physical integrity of the worker. It places the primary responsibility for safety on the employer, requiring them to identify hazards, implement controls, and provide appropriate personal protective equipment, PP. Though for fire, it's more about collective protection and prevention. And when it comes to fire protection on construction sites, OSHA is quite specific in its requirements, especially in Standard 29 CFR 1926. 150, which directly addresses fire protection, and other related subparts like 1926. 151, flammable liquids, 1926. 152, storage of flammable and combustible liquids, and 1926. 352, fire prevention in welding, cutting, and brazing. These aren't just suggestions, they are legally binding mandates designed to prevent catastrophic losses. Now let me tell you something that might go against your intuition, but it's a brutal truth backed by data and countless tragedies. I used to think the biggest fire risk was in a finished building, full of people, electrical systems, and appliances. But I was wrong. And when I realized this, it was a profound shift in perspective. The most dangerous moment for a building is when it's still being built. This might sound illogical. How can an unfinished structure, a skeleton of concrete and steel, be more dangerous than a fully occupied building? But when you look at the dynamics of a construction site, it makes terrifying sense. Construction sites are inherently high-risk environments. They are dynamic, chaotic, and constantly changing. They are a cauldron of activities that generate heat, sparks, and open flames, often in close proximity to an abundance of temporary combustible materials. OSHA and NFPA standards are built on this understanding. They recognize that the unique conditions of a construction site create a perfect storm for fire. Consider these factors: abundance of combustible materials, wood, plastics, insulation, packaging, solvents, paints, temporary coverings. These are everywhere. Unlike a finished building where such materials are often enclosed or treated, on a construction site, they are exposed and often accumulated. Lack of permanent fire protection systems. Sprinklers, fire alarms, and compartmentalization are usually not fully operational or even installed during construction. This means that if a fire starts, there's no automatic suppression or early warning system in place. Open spaces and vertical openings. Unfinished structures often have large open areas and vertical shafts, like elevator shafts or stairwells, that act as chimneys, allowing fire and smoke to spread rapidly throughout the building, vertically and horizontally, with terrifying speed. Temporary electrical systems. Often improvised, overloaded, or damaged, temporary wiring is a frequent source of ignition. Hot work operations. Welding, cutting, grinding, and soldering are common activities that produce sparks and intense heat, which are direct ignition sources. Limited access and egress. Escape routes can be incomplete, obstructed by materials, or constantly changing, making evacuation difficult and dangerous. Human factor. Pressure to meet deadlines, lack of training, complacency, and negligence can lead to critical safety lapses. I've seen firsthand the consequences of not understanding this. Fires that start small, but due to these unique conditions, escalate into uncontrollable infernos in minutes. Accidents that could have been prevented if we truly grasp that a construction site is, by its very nature, a potential fire trap. OSHA's 29 CFR 1926. 150 is a constant reminder that employers must implement comprehensive fire protection programs specifically tailored to these unique and elevated risks. Now, OSHA's big insight, and what I consider the starting point for any effective fire safety program on a construction site, is hazard assessment and the development of a comprehensive fire prevention plan, FPP. There's no point in just having a few extinguishers scattered around and hoping for the best. OSHA requires that the employer, and we as conscious workers, need to understand exactly what fire dangers are present in our work environment. It's a systematic and thorough process, not a guess. Imagine you are the safety manager for a high-rise building under construction. You can't simply assume that fire won't happen here. You need to go to every floor, observe every workstation, talk to every supervisor. What materials are being used? Are there hot work operations scheduled? Where are the temporary electrical panels? Are flammable liquids stored correctly? Each scenario requires a detailed analysis, a magnifying glass on the specific fire risks. This hazard assessment, according to OSHA's 29 CFR 1926, 150 and NFPA 241, must identify, at a minimum, sources of ignition. Where can a fire start? This includes hot work, welding, cutting, grinding, temporary electrical systems, overloaded circuits, damaged wiring, heating equipment, temporary heaters, smoking, open flames, and even static electricity. The plan must detail how these sources will be controlled or eliminated. Types and locations of combustible materials. What materials are present? Wood, insulation, plastics, solvents, paints, fuels. Where are they stored? How much is there? The plan must specify safe storage practices, segregation of incompatible materials, and regular removal of waste. NFPA 241 emphasizes limiting the amount of combustible materials on site and storing them away from ignition sources and building structures. Fire load. This refers to the total amount of heat that could be released if all combustible materials in an area were to burn. A high fire load means a faster, more intense fire. The assessment must consider this to determine the necessary fire suppression resources. Means of egress. Are there clear, unobstructed, and well-marked escape routes? Are there enough of them? Are they protected? This is critical for worker evacuation. OSHA's 29 CFR 1926. 34 mandates that all exits must be kept clear and unobstructed. Temporary fire protection systems. What temporary fire suppression and detection systems are in place? This includes standpipes, fire extinguishers, and temporary alarm systems. Emergency procedures. What are the procedures for reporting a fire, evacuating personnel, and contacting emergency services? Who is responsible for what? OSHA not only requires this assessment, but also that it be documented in a written fire prevention plan. This plan must be available at the job site for inspection. This creates a record, a knowledge base that can be reviewed and updated as the construction progresses and risks change. I always say that safety begins with knowledge. If you don't know what threatens you, how will you protect yourself? OSHA and NFPA understand this perfectly and place hazard assessment and the FPP as the cornerstone of fire protection. Without it, fire safety is a shot in the dark, a gamble with human lives and massive investments. With the fire prevention plan in hand, the next step, and perhaps the most crucial for preventing fires, is ignition source control. This is where we actively manage and eliminate the things that can start a fire. OSHA and NFPA are emphatic. Preventing the spark is always easier and safer than fighting the blaze. It's like choosing the right tool for the job. You don't use a screwdriver to hammer a nail, right? Fire prevention is a science, not a guess. Let's break down some of the most common ignition sources on construction sites and what American standards say about controlling them. Hot work operations, welding, cutting, grinding. This is, without a doubt, one of the biggest culprits. Sparks from welding or cutting can travel over 35 feet, 10 meters, and ignite combustible materials. OSHA 29 CFR 1926. 352 and NFPA 51B, standard for fire prevention during welding, cutting, and other hot work, are the Bibles here. They require hot work permits, a formal authorization system to ensure all precautions are taken before hot work begins. Fire watch, a dedicated person fire watch, must be present during and for at least 30 minutes after hot work. equipped with appropriate fire extinguishing equipment. Clearance from combustibles. Hot work must be performed at least 35 feet, 10 meters, away from combustibles, or combustibles must be protected with fire-resistant blankets or shields. Extinguishers. Appropriate fire extinguishers must be immediately available. Ventilation. Adequate ventilation to remove fumes and gases. Temporary electrical systems. As mentioned, these are often a weak link. OSHA 29 CFR 1926, Subpart K, Electrical, and NFPA 70, National Electrical Code NEC are critical. They mandate proper grounding. All electrical equipment and systems must be properly grounded. Ground fault circuit interrupters, GFCIs required for all 120-volt, single-phase, 15 and 20 ampere receptacles on construction sites that are not part of the permanent wiring of the building or structure. Overcurrent protection. Circuit breakers and fuses must be correctly sized to prevent overloading. Protection of cables. Electrical cords and cables must be protected from damage, not run through doorways or under heavy equipment, and kept out of standing water. Qualified personnel. Only qualified persons should install, inspect, and maintain temporary electrical systems. Heating equipment. Temporary heaters are often used in cold weather. OSHA 29 CFR 1926. 154, Temporary heating devices, and NFPA 31, Standard for the installation of oil-burning equipment, NFPA 54, National Fuel Gas Code, and NFPA 58, Liquefied Petroleum Gas Code apply. They require clearance from combustibles. Heaters must be kept a safe distance from combustible materials. Proper ventilation, to prevent carbon monoxide buildup and ensure adequate oxygen for combustion. Stable placement. Heaters must be placed on stable, non-combustible surfaces. Fuel storage. Fuels, like propane, must be stored and handled according to specific safety standards, away from ignition sources. Smoking, a simple yet dangerous habit. OSHA 29 CFR 1926. 150A3 requires that smoking shall be prohibited in areas where fire or explosion hazards exist. This means designated smoking areas, away from combustibles, with proper receptacles for butts. It's about controlling human behavior. OSHA requires the employer to certify that each employee has received and understood the training on these procedures. This is usually done through a signed record. I always say, you can have all the fire extinguishers in the world, but if you don't control the spark, you're just waiting for a disaster. And rigorous ignition source control is the key to that. OSHA leaves no room for doubt. Every potential spark must be managed. Once we've controlled the ignition sources, the next critical pillar in fire prevention, according to OSHA and NFPA, is combustible material management. Because fire needs three things to exist: heat, ignition source, oxygen, and fuel. If we control the fuel, even if a spark occurs, the fire won't have anything to feed on. It's about starving the fire before it even starts. Construction sites are inherently rich in fuel. From the moment materials arrive until the last piece of waste is removed, there's a constant flow of combustible items. The challenge is to manage this flow so that it doesn't become a fire hazard. Storage of flammable and combustible liquids, paints, solvents, adhesives, fuels for equipment. These are highly volatile and dangerous. OSHA 29 CFR 1926. 152 and NFPA 30, Flammable and Combustible Liquids Code, are the primary standards. They require approved containers. Liquids must be stored in approved, tightly closed safety cans or drums. Designated storage areas. Flammable liquids must be stored in designated, well-ventilated areas, away from ignition sources and out of direct sunlight. Quantity limits. There are strict limits on the amount of flammable liquids that can be stored inside buildings and in specific areas. Fire-resistant cabinets. Larger quantities often require storage in approved fire-resistant cabinets. Spill control. Measures to contain spills and prevent them from spreading. Storage of LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, and other compressed gases. Propane tanks for heaters, oxygen, and acetylene for welding. These are explosive and highly flammable. OSHA 29 CFR 1926. 153, Liquefied Petroleum Gas, and NFPA 58, Liquefied Petroleum Gas Code, NFPA 55, Compressed Gases and Cryogenic Fluids Code apply. They require upright storage. Cylinders must be stored upright and secured to prevent tipping. Segregation. Oxygen cylinders must be separated from fuel gas cylinders by at least 20 feet, 6 meters, or by a non-combustible barrier at least 5 feet 1.5 meters high with a fire resistance rating of at least 1/2 hour. Protection from damage. Cylinders must be protected from physical damage and excessive heat. Valve caps. Valve protection caps must be in place when cylinders are not in use or are being transported. General combustible materials. Wood, plastics, insulation, waste. OSHA 29 CFR 1926. 25. Housekeeping, and NFPA 241 are key. They require regular removal of waste. Combustible waste and debris, wood scraps, sawdust, packaging, must be removed regularly from work areas and disposed of in approved, covered metal containers. Limited accumulation. The accumulation of combustible materials should be minimized. Safe storage of building materials. Large piles of combustible building materials should be stored at a safe distance from the building under construction. Isolation protection. Combustible insulation materials should be protected from ignition sources during installation. Housekeeping and site organization. This seems simple, but it's fundamental. A clean site is a safer site. OSHA 29 CFR 1926. 25 requires that during the course of construction, alteration, or repairs, form and scrap lumber with protruding nails, and all other debris, shall be kept cleared from work areas, passageways and stairs, in and around buildings or other structures. This extends to all combustible waste. OSHA requires the employer to certify that each employee has received and understood the training on these procedures. This is usually done through a signed record. I always say, the best fire prevention plan in the world is useless if the site is disorganized and full of fuel. And proper material management is the key to that. OSHA leaves no room for doubt. The site needs to be clean, organized, and free of unnecessary fuel loads. And speaking of prevention and responsibility, OSHA also addresses the critical pillar of emergency response and evacuation. Because even with the best prevention, accidents can happen. A fire can start. And when it does, the effectiveness of your emergency plan can mean the difference between life and death. The effectiveness of protection directly depends on the integrity of the plan and the training of the personnel. OSHA's 29 CFR 1926, 150E Fire Protection, and 29 CFR 1926, 34 Means of Egress, along with NFPA 241, provide comprehensive requirements for ensuring that workers can safely evacuate and that initial fire response is effective. Means of egress, escape routes. This is paramount. OSHA 29 CFR 1926, 34 requires clear and unobstructed. All exits must be kept clear and unobstructed at all times. This means no materials, no equipment, no debris blocking stairwells, doorways, or pathways. Adequate number and width. There must be a sufficient number of exits of adequate width for the number of employees and the type of construction. Properly marked and lighted. Exits must be clearly marked with signs and adequately lighted, especially during hours of darkness or low visibility. Temporary emergency lighting might be necessary. Continuous and unchanged. Escape routes should be maintained as continuously as possible throughout the construction process, and workers must be informed of any changes. NFPA 101, Life Safety Code, while primarily for occupied buildings, heavily influences the design of safe egress paths in construction. The challenge on a construction site is that these routes are constantly evolving as the building progresses. Daily checks are essential. Fire extinguishers, the first line of defense for small fires. OSHA 29 CFR 1926, 150C requires proper type and quantity. Extinguishers must be of the proper type, Class A, B, C, D, K, for the potential hazards and in sufficient numbers. Accessibility, readily accessible and located within specific travel distances, e.g., 100 feet for Class A, 50 feet for Class B. Mounted and marked, clearly visible, mounted on hangers or in cabinets, and marked. Inspected and maintained, regularly inspected, monthly, and maintained, annually, by a competent person. Training, employees must be trained in the proper use of extinguishers. Temporary fire alarm systems. OSHA 29 CFR 1926, 150E requires that an effective fire alarm system, either permanent or temporary, be installed as soon as practicable. This system must be audible throughout the site to alert all employees. NFPA 241 provides guidance on the design and installation of temporary fire alarm systems. Standpipes and hoses. For larger structures, water supply is critical. OSHA 29 CFR 1926. 150D requires that standpipes be installed progressively as the building height increases, ensuring that water is available on upper floors. Hoses and nozzles must be available at each standpipe connection. Emergency Action Plan, EAP. OSHA 29 CFR 1926. 35 requires employers to have an EAP for all workplaces. For construction, this plan must include evacuation procedures, how to evacuate, including routes and assembly points. Reporting procedures, how to report a fire or other emergency. Emergency contact information, phone numbers for fire department, ambulance, etc. Employee roles, assigning specific duties to employees, e.g., fire watch, first aid. Training, all employees must be trained on the EAP. OSHA requires the employer to certify that each employee has received and understood the training on these emergency procedures. This is usually done through a signed record. I always say, the best fire protection equipment in the world is useless if workers don't know how to use it or how to escape. And proper emergency planning and training are the keys to that. OSHA leaves no room for doubt. The worker needs to be competent and aware of their role in an emergency. In addition to everything we've already discussed, OSHA and NFPA, along with good safety practices, make us think about some super important additional considerations that are often overlooked, but are crucial for a truly fire-safe construction site. Competent person. OSHA frequently refers to the need for a competent person to oversee various safety aspects. For fire protection, this means someone who is capable of identifying existing and predictable hazards in the surroundings or working conditions which are unsanitary, hazardous, or dangerous to employees, and who has authorization to take prompt corrective measures to eliminate them. This person is key to ensuring compliance and proactive safety. Regular inspections and audits. A fire prevention plan is not a static document. The construction site is constantly changing. Therefore, regular documented inspections and audits are essential to ensure that all fire prevention and protection measures are in place and effective. This includes checking extinguishers, verifying clear egress paths, inspecting hot work areas, and reviewing material storage. Communication and coordination. On a large construction site, multiple contractors and subcontractors may be working simultaneously. Effective communication and coordination regarding fire safety procedures are paramount. All parties must be aware of the overall fire prevention plan and their specific responsibilities. Site security. Preventing unauthorized access to the construction site, especially after hours, is crucial to prevent arson or accidental fires caused by trespassers. Temporary structures and scaffolding. These must be considered in the fire plan. Scaffolding can block egress, and temporary structures can add to the fire load. Materials used for temporary enclosures should ideally be non-combustible or fire retardant. Weather conditions. High winds can accelerate fire spread. Dry conditions increase the flammability of materials. The fire prevention plan should consider how weather conditions might impact fire risk and response. Post-fire investigation. If a fire does occur, a thorough investigation is critical to determine the cause, identify failures in the prevention plan, and implement corrective actions to prevent recurrence. This is a learning opportunity, albeit a costly one. Safety culture, finally, and perhaps most importantly, is the overarching safety culture. OSHA and NFPA standards are not just rules. They are tools to foster a culture where safety is a core value, not just a compliance checkbox. This means management commitment. Leadership must visibly and actively support safety. Employee involvement. Workers must be encouraged to identify hazards and suggest improvements. Training and education. Continuous and effective training for all personnel. Accountability. Holding individuals at all levels accountable for safety performance. Continuous improvement. Always seeking ways to enhance safety. OSHA and NFPA 241 are not there to make our lives difficult, but to protect us. Their standards are the result of years of study, research, and unfortunately, many accidents that could have been avoided. They are a robust guide for employers and workers to build a safer environment, where our lives and investments are always protected from the devastating power of fire. So everyone, the next time you're on a construction site, or even just passing by one, stop and think, is this site truly safe from fire? Is there a robust fire prevention plan in place? Are the workers trained? Are the risks being managed? Remember OSHA's guidelines and the comprehensive requirements of NFPA 241. Our lives, and the massive investments in these projects, are too valuable to be neglected. They allow us to build, create, progress, and interact with the world. Protecting them is protecting our ability to live fully and build our future. Safety is everyone's responsibility. If you're an employer, ensure your fire protection program aligns with OSHA and the best practices of NFPA 241. Invest in comprehensive hazard assessments, rigorous ignition source control, meticulous combustible material management, and robust emergency response plans. If you're a worker, demand and understand the correct fire safety procedures. Don't accept working in an unsafe environment. Your life and your health depend on it. I hope this video has been useful and has shed light on the critical importance of fire protection on construction sites and the complexity behind these essential safety standards. If you liked it, leave a like, share it with your coworkers, and subscribe to the channel for more safety content. Leave your experiences and questions about fire safety on construction sites in the comments. I'd love to read and interact with you. Until next time, and stay safe.